the honor of anthem of Islamic Republic of Pakistan. We will begin with the auspicious name of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان
Subhanallah. Dear colleagues, participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. On behalf of the International Center for Chemical and Biological Sciences, HEJ Research Institute of Chemistry and Dr. Panjwani Center for Molecular Medicine and Drug Research, I welcome you all on this 2 days workshop entitled Uses and Applications of AFM, that is Atomic Force Microscope. With these brief words, I would like to invite the Director ICCBS, Professor Dr. Raza Shah, for his introductory remarks.
First of all, let me thank my junior colleague, Professor Dr. Samal Yusuf, for organizing this wonderful event on atomic force microscopy. You know that the landscape of research in this world is changing so rapidly, and that change is associated with certain techniques. And one of their technique is the atomic force microscopy. And we just realize that we should just give a brief glimpses where one can use this atomic force microscopy and what are the basic principles, and we do have this technique in our institute. So that was one of the reasons that we decided that we should just have a brief introduction of this technique in these 2 days workshop. And the importance of this technique is imperative. You know that this is a very, very important technique of nanotechnology. And nanotechnology is rapidly growing and expanding area. And it's nearly impacting every day and every field of our life. So if you just go through the various application of the nanotechnology, it ranges from medicines to textile to construction materials and so on. You just name it, and you will find the application of the nanotechnology. The history of nanotechnology is as old as the history of life on this earth. The first nanomaterial which was there is the DNA molecule. And it is again one of the most studied system nowadays in the people working in the area of nanotechnology, and they are using the DNA still and manipulating DNA for various kind of application. But you know that in the past several centuries, the people were using the nanoparticles and nanocrystals, but they were not aware that they are using these nanocrystals. You know that there are several churches in the Europe, and the stains and the painting of those churches are still intact after several hundred years of time. So and it was investigated that why these paints are still intact and they are still fresh. So it was discovered that they were prepared from the nanoparticle, gold nanoparticle. Marc Chagall was a famous painter. He was using the nanoparticles to paint his various kind of he was sculptures. He was painting the sculptures with nanoparticle. Similarly, the Romans, they were using carbon sulfide nanocrystals to dye the hairs. But they were not aware that they are using the nanoparticles. But the real beginning of the nanoparticle started, the nanotechnology started in 1959 when Professor Richard Feynman delivered a famous lecture in the American Physical Society annual meeting. There is a plenty of room at the bottom. And in that lecture, he introduced the concept of the nanotechnology, where he just presented the idea that one day we will be an era where there will be nano machines or molecular machines, and those machines will enter into our body. They will just remove the unwanted material, and they will coming out from the body, and there will be no need of scissors and knife. And that was the time when he introduced the concept that the power of small. He used the word in his lecture, the power of small. That these small particles, they have a tremendous implications, and then the development. But still, you see that these materials were there for the centuries, but the scientists were not able to utilize them for the benefit of the mankind. And the basic reason of these were the characterization tool. the manipulation tool. Those tools were missing. And then these peoples, and that was one of the reasons that in the past our scientific community were not able to use them to their potential because they were not aware that they are using. And why the nanoparticle and the nanomaterial are so important? There are several reasons for this. But let me tell you that if you convert a particle from the micro scale to the nanoscale, you just change the material properties of that particle, which we call the band gap. So you create a band gap of the C of the electron, and that is responsible for the changing in the material properties. Like you see that I was delivering a lecture in Islamabad last a couple of weeks ago. So I was just telling them that that nowadays that this the periodic table which we are using nowadays here. So the distribution of the elements are based on the properties of the elements. Like the gold is distributed in the periodic group based on its properties that it's an inert metal. So gold, silver, these metals are just distributed in the periodic table based on their properties. But now I personally believe that since we know that the material properties changes from the microscale to the nanoscale, so this distribution of the element is not relevant now, because whatever the properties you have written in the periodic table for that particular element, it's not applicable at the nanoscale. For example, it is written that the gold is inert metal. But if you prepare gold nanoparticle of the same, it becomes superconductor. It is super active. So it means that properties on the basis of which you have distributed these elements in the periodic table is not relevant now at the nanoscale. So it's changing everything. The material properties is changing because with the help of the nanotechnology, you can just introduce the strength in the material. For example, with the carbon nanotube, if you just use the carbon nanotube, you can hang an elephant with a very thin thread of the carbon nanotube. So that shows the strength. So that's the reason that one day we will be an era where will be these steels and these iron will be replaced by the nanofibers, and they will be equally strength, and these we will lose our dependencies on the steels and the irons and this. So that's the reason that we will have to change our research direction. Another is like many of the dresses which we are wearing now, that would be replaced by some things very strong, like the fabric of nanocellulose. They are, if you just prepare a fabric of the same feeling, the same size, and the same weight, and but if you prepare that from the nanocellulose, then the bullet cannot penetrate in that fabric. So it means that with the normal, you will prepare a dress for your soldiers and even for the normal people. So there would be no need of a jacket, a bullet jacket. You can just wear a normal dress, and the bullet will not be able to penetrate. Another area which in the nanotechnology would, like that there are metamaterial now available. So these, if you prepare a dress from the metamaterial, that metamaterial just reflect the light inside itself. So any person who is wearing those metamaterial fabric, so that person can disappear from the normal eyes. And that metamaterial can be used for our soldiers, for our tanks, and for the defense purpose, because the enemy will not see them, but they would be physically present there. So that what in the Harry Potter novel, which was there, it was used there, and it was considered as a fantasy. Now it's become reality. So these kind of materials are there. Like these are some of the example which I'm just quoting. But I'm just connecting them that why this development in this area happened in so rapidly in the past 2 or 3 decades, because this area is extremely important, but the real development in this area happened in the last 3 decades. And the reason was that there were no characterization tool, no manipulation tool. And one of that characterization tool, the most important one, is the atomic force microscope, which we will be just discussing this in the next 2 days. And this technique have revolutionized, have changed this whole area of research in the nanotechnology. And that is the reason that we have seen so rapid development after the invention of the atomic force microscope, scanning electron microscope, and transmission electron microscope, because now we can see the nanoparticle with this technique. We can see the material properties, we can manipulate the material properties of the nanomaterial at the nanoscale with the help of the atomic force microscope. We can just we can hold the nanomaterial, we can just stretch the nanomaterial, we can just analyze the nanomaterial, we can just see the 3 dimension of the nanomaterial. We can see nanoparticles and threads on the surface of the bacteria, which was a dream for the several people to see what is on the surface of the bacteria, because and that is the reason that the rapid development which happened in the last 2 decades, like if you just go back to let's say 19 in the beginning of 1990, these cellular phones, they were not available. They were available only with the richest people who were there, and with the and you were able to buy these only with several 100,000 rupees. But now these phones are there with in the hands of everyone. That is because the transistors which were used at that time, and it was very big one, like the computer. That was like the IBM developed the computer. It was very big, and it was accommodated in a room like this. And then we witnessed the area of Pentium, and so. But what happened? Actually, the scientists realized the importance of the small materials. They just reduced the size. The transistors and the material which were used in these machines, they were reduced in size, and at the same time the efficiency were increased and the energy consumption were decreased. These were the three parameter which were addressed, and nanotechnology and these equipments play an extremely important role in the development of these nowadays electronic gadgets, which include laptop, computer, and cellular phone. And the main reason behind this development is these equipments, these characterization tools, which were prepared by the scientists And with the help of these tools, these techniques, the scientists were able to just study the nanoparticle, study the nanomaterial. You see that what is the size of the nanoparticle? If you just for the comparison, that a human eye can see a size of 10,000 nanometer or bigger, a normal human eye. So that means while the people who are working in the area of nanotechnology, they are manipulating subjects below than 100 nanometer. If someone is working manipulating any objects and the one dimension of that object is below than 100 nanometer, then we say that this person is working in the area of nanotechnology. So you see that they are dealing with very small. Similarly, the normal human hair, it is 30,000 nanometer thick. And nano people working in the area of nanotechnology, they are manipulating particles or material less than 100 nanometer. So this just reflect that that these small materials which are there, they have been manipulated and they have been used in various industries to just get out the desired properties, to just extract the desired properties, and that is the reason that nowadays there is so rapid development in the technology, and nanotechnology is responsible for this whole development. If you just go to the textile industry nowadays, dyes, there are painting material like the Mercedes have introduced the paint which is scratchless on the cars. Similarly, self-healing material at the nanoscale were prepared again by Ferrari, in which if there is a bend in the car, it would automatically just heal up, like if there is an accident in that car. So that self-healing material will automatically get back its shape. So you do not need to just take this into the dental or further. So you see that if you understand at the molecular level the properties of the material, then you can use them for your own benefit and for the benefit of the mankind. In the nanomedicine, there are hundreds of examples, and that have been used, and the people are using. So I would see that where with the advancement of the nanotechnology, and which was possible due to the development of the atomic force microscope and transmission electron microscope. With this technology, we will enter in an era, maybe after 15 years or 20 years, when there will be no need for the people to just work. All the work will be done by the robots and the machines. And only the mankind would just try to keep itself fit and healthy. And that what the rest, everything will be done by the robots and the machine. And that is what we are entering, and it is in the corner. In that is, at this point, it is somehow fantasy, but many things which we are just observing now, in the past it was fantasy, but now it is a reality. So with this, I would just all the participants, I would just urge you to just be focused. This is a very important area. This is the area of the future. And if you understand the basic principle of the atomic force microscopy, that what we will try during this 2 days workshop, then you are learning something which is critically important for the future, which is critically important for the future development of the nanotechnology and in your career. So this is a very important and timely topic, and that's what we would be just discussing with this. Thank you very much for listening me so patiently.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for your very relevant and enlightened comments. Let me inform you that ICCBS is jointly organizing this event with Sindh Innovation Research and Education Network, that is SIREN, and UNESCO Chair on Medicine and Bioorganic Natural Product Chemistry. With this, I wanted to inform you that under this roof, we have the participants from various departments of University of Karachi, various centers of the ICCBS, Dow University of Health Sciences, International Islamic University, Islamabad, Dow University of Health Sciences, Institute of Sustainable Helophytes, University of Karachi, Muhammad Ali Jinnah University, Jinnah Sindh Medical University, Federal Urdu University of Arts, Science and Technology, and National Institute of Biotechnology and Genetic Engineering. In addition, we have few international participants from Yemen and Oman as well. With this brief inaugural session, I would like to request all of you to kindly quickly assemble outside on the stairs for a group photo, and then proceed for a cup of tea on the second floor of this building. And we will assemble again at 11 a.m. for the first lecture session of this workshop. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the first session of this 2 days workshop. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Professor Dr. Mohammad Reza Shah. He is a prominent Pakistani scientist specializing in chemistry, particularly in the areas of nanotechnology, material sciences, and drug discovery systems. He is a well-known figure in the field of nanomedicines with significant contributions to the development of careers for target drug discovery. He completed his doctoral research in 2003 under the Sandwich Program at Max Planck Research Institute for Polymer from Germany, and HEJ, followed by postdoctoral research at the University of Geneva, Switzerland. Professor Shah is currently serving as the director of the International Center for Chemical Sciences. In addition to that, he is the chairholder of UNESCO Chair on Medicine and Bioorganic Natural Product Chemistry at University of Karachi. He is the president of Chemical Society of Pakistan. He is the guest professor of Nankai University, China, visiting professor of Hunan University of Tradition Medicine, China, secretary Pakistan Academy of Sciences of Sindh Chapter, advisor of the International Tradition Medicine Clinical Trial Registry, China. He is the editor of the Chemical Society of Pakistan and deputy coordinator of National Chemistry Talent Contest Program of Higher Education Commission of Pakistan. Today, he will talk with us regarding the applications of atomic force microscopy in nanosciences. So please welcome Professor Dr. Mohammad Reza.
Okay, Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So once again, thank you so much that most of the people who are present in the morning are still with us. What I would be talking about is the basic principle of atomic force microscopy, and what is the atomic force microscopy, what are the basic principles. As I told you in my inaugural address, that this technique is extremely important in the sense that it is associated with the development of the nanotechnology. That this technique is responsible for the development which we see nowadays in our daily life. Because with this technique, we manage to analyze, characterize the nanomaterial, and we also manipulated the nanomaterial with the help of this technique. So I would be just briefly discussing about this technique, and if you have any kind of question, I will be happy to answer that. You know that this is Dr. Maqsood will also just talk about the microscopy, but I would not just spend time on this. But that is the atomic force microscope is basically an imaging technique where you can see or analyze the material at the nanoscale. And this was actually developed in 1986. That is the area where it was developed by Professor Binning and Rohrer. These were the two scientists who developed the atomic force microscopy in their laboratory. And normally the atomic force microscope, these are images from our atomic force microscope, which is available in our nanotechnology center. Actually, it consists of these parts. One is a probe, which we called as a cantilever. The other is a cantilever deflection and monitoring system. That is what we would be talking about later on. And scanning system, that is a piezoelectric scanner are there in the atomic force microscope, and various electronic parts and computer. So these are actually the basic component of any kind of atomic force microscope, because nowadays various kind of companies are preparing that. Uh, uh, Actually, what is the principle of the atomic force microscopy? The basic principle of atomic force microscopy is that the AFM is containing a tip, which we term in the technical language as a cantilever. That is called cantilever. That cantilever just scan the surface, and whenever it reach to the just about to reach to the surface, then what happened? There used to some kind of interaction between the tip and the sample, and those interactions are van der Waals interaction. So a van der Waal interaction just come into play between the tip and the surface, and that due to those van der Waal interaction, then the tip or the cantilever that just bend either in the vertical direction or in the lateral direction. So there is like a bending or movement in the vertical direction or in the lateral direction. And these forces which just bend them or just affect the movement on the vertical direction and the lateral direction, that just is responsible for the imaging. Because you know that will be showing some of the example that these are the three directions, x, y, z dimension, that it's the tip move in all these three dimensions. And these, whenever it's just moving, so there is a laser on the tip. Along with that movement, the movement of that laser is also affected, because that reflect the laser on the photodiode detector, and whenever there is a movement, that moment and that reflection also just change the dimension or the direction of the lasers. So it at one height it just in coherence on one site on the diode detector. On the other height, when the height is decreased, it's just become in coherence with the another position of the photodiode detector. And that difference in the moment that is responsible for the imaging, and that we will just be discussing a bit more detail. So, and I will just try to explain it a bit more easy language, that how it is doing. You know that our we have a scanner in the atomic force microscope, like which is here, like this is a scanner. You know that in the scanner there is a X and Y, and then there is a Z direction. Okay, this scanner is made from the piezo material. And what is that piezo ceramics material? Actually, this material expand and contract in the presence of voltage gradient. And this is a specific kind of material. And this expansion and contraction actually helping in the image creation. And that is and what we can do with the AFM, like we can measure the height, the optical absorption, magnetism, and and so on. That we will also be discussing. When we are discussing each of them in more detail, then you will have a better understanding what I'm talking about. In the atomic force microscopic, lenses are not used because it's operate on the force distance curve, because and it just create imaging through van der Waal interactions. It's not like the optical deflection of the lights which is happening. There is a laser, but the laser is not bombarded on the surface. It is on the cantilever. So the surface which you are analyzing, it has nothing to do with the laser. Because laser is not focused on that surface, rather than during the imaging process, you will have to focus the laser on the tip or the cantilever. Because whenever the cantilever is moving up and down or in the lateral direction, the laser will also move accordingly, and that would generate the image. And as I mentioned that the force measurement which is there is the van der Waals interaction. These are the important interactions which are responsible for the image creation, because under these van der Waals interaction, the cantilever deflect. If there is no van der Waal interaction, the cantilever would not deflect. It would be in the air and you would not get the image. So under certain distance, when you bring cantilever to the surface, under a certain distance, a van der Waal interaction is created, and the cantilever just sense the surface. They develop a sense on the surface that they are sensing. And whenever it starts sensing, then during the scanning, if there is an upper if there is a particle with a bigger side, it would just go up. And then if there is a particle with a smaller size, it would go down. And that kind of, because it create a balanced height and a balanced distance. So that would just tell you the properties and the image which is created. And that is how the atomic force microscope act. And the important is the sensitivity of the detection. The cantilever are a bit flexible, but there are cantilevers which are hard, because in some cases you need hard cantilever, especially in the material sciences, you need a hard cantilever where you can have a more sharp and clean image. But in the biological sample, if you are dealing with the biological material, you need a more flexible cantilever, because in that case, the biological material, they are soft. So if you are using hard material, you will destroy your sample. So in that case, you need a soft cantilever. And positioning and force back loop, application is wide. That what I just discussed, that how it works, that piezo ceramics and sample surface. You know that this is that photodiode detector. So in order, and this is the cantilever. So what like this is our sample. So what is happening that when you load your compound, let's say nanoparticle, you will have to load here. So once you load those your material here, then what happens? that this is the cantilever which is attached to the sample holder, and it will just scan, start here, and here it will just move through and move, and it will go back and forth the moment. And in that process, you see that there is a laser coming on, but that laser should be right on the middle of the tip of the cantilever, so that once it just move, so once it move, that the deflecting light like this one, the deflecting, it should at the beginning it should be in the middle. This red spot should be in the middle. So once it is in the middle, so what happened that when it is moving here and there, so that the light which is coming here, it just deflect either here, it just position it here, and a different position. And that deflection just going to a controlling system. And that controlling system is sensitive and recognized this whole system and the activity here. So in that case, an image is created, and that what we see in our daily routine analysis. So I just want to so that everyone can understand it a bit more easily, because this is the basic principle that what is here, as you see that I mentioned that the laser is just bombarded on the AFM tape, not on the sample. The sample is not receiving the laser. The sample is just experience van der Waal interaction with the cantilever. So there is a van der Waal interaction between the sample and this cantilever. And whenever there is a like bigger size, so there is a constant laser bombardment on the tip, and whenever it's just going up, down, and if the surface is rough, so this deflection which is here, this one, it's just sense the properties here. So, and this deflection is basically responsible for the whole process. And this deflection is both on the vertical direction and in the lateral direction. So it means that it is in the X, Y, and the Z axis. This deflection is felt. And that deflection is actually, once that deflection is achieved, then the rest is done by the electronic system. And this is the basic principle. Now, you can like Saira and Tasmina will just show you how to prepare the sample after this lectures tomorrow in the afternoon. But you know that in the most cases we use mica surface. This is actually atomically flat surface. So we load our sample on the mica, or there are some silicon vapors, but mica is atomically flat. So if your particle is very small and you want to get a very minute detail, so you can use the mica surface. But if your particle size is a bit bigger one and you do not need, then you can use silicon vapor, because mica is a bit more expensive. But you know that the mica contain many sheets. So once you load the sample and after you finished all your activity, so you can reuse it, just peeling up the upper layer with the scotch tape. You just put the scotch tape and then remove it. So then the fresh surface will appear. So that is what is before loading your sample, you will have to just peel up the upper layer so that you do not encounter with the impurities. So the upper layer you can just peel up, and this would be so that is why in the literature you will always read a word freshly cleaved silica, mica sheet, freshly cleaved mica sheet. So it means that you have removed the upper layer. So that is what is it. Silicon vapor and glass can also be used, but the silicon is a bit more flatter, but the glass surface is more rough. And if you need to analyze something which is very small, and your interest is on that small particle, or the dimensions or the structure of that small particle, then what you will to do, you will have to coat glass with gold through a sputtering machine. You know that it is a kind of sputtering we do have in our system, that they evaporate the gold, and the gold is deposited uniformly on the surface. So that is extremely flat. Normally, you will generate, if you are a expert in that, so you will generate extremely flat gold surface, and this is also commercially available. We do have in our facility those gold plated surfaces. They can be deposited on the mica sheet or in the glass or even on the silicon. No? Depends that on your application. So that is you can prepare sample in that way. Then you can immobilize and the sample on the piezo scanner. That is what they will show you how to just load the sample on the sample plate. And then, yeah, the AFM is having the added advantage compared to transmission electron microscope and scanning electron microscope, that it can be used in liquid. Like you can analyze sample in a petri dish. Like you did some electron microscopy in another kind of microscope, and if you want to just see the properties at the nanoscale, you can use the same, but there are a specialized petri dish, because we do have a system available where you can use that one. So you see that you just think about what you can do with the AFM, you will find it in our facility. So this is a very initially, and we ordered this in 2012. It's a very old, but still, it is a complete system. We can do all kind of studies with it. So you can analyze sample in the petri dish, in the liquid, and we do have liquid cells. In the liquid cells, you can just incorporate the liquid, and then you can. That is very difficult. I just did a couple of times with Syra, but after that. You need a bit more expertise, because you know that as I mentioned in the beginning, that there is a van der Waal interaction between the tip and the sample. So you will have to just maintain that interaction. But in the liquid there is a diffusion process, and that diffusion process of the liquid always interfere with those very minute forces between the van der Waal interaction between the tip and the cantilever, and you will always experience a noise in the imaging. So that is that is a bit difficult, but with expertise you can do it. We have done a few times in the beginning when we got the equipment, so Saira joined us. So I just carried out these kind of analysis with her, so that she can understand how to do the imaging in the liquid. But it is in the transmission electron microscope and the atomic force microscope. In the atomic force microscope, the laser is not bombarded on the sample. Rather, it is, as I just showed you in the previous slide, there it is bombarded on the cantilever. While in the transmission electron microscope, it is directly on the sample. So there is the chance that it can just deform your sample. You can image live bacteria. At one point of time, maybe I might have an image or so. We were just searching for the fission of the bacteria, the live bacteria which can just fission, and in that time, it was in the beginning Saira didn't join, but initially I had another co-worker, Shujan. So we were just analyzing the bacteria, whether they can, at which time point it can just fragment and just create daughter cells. And that process you can analyze with the AFM in the live, and you can also prepare a movie out of that. So that will just show you how to do, and I will also just show you that, some of the images. So this is that cannot be done with the transmission electron microscope, because the electronic bombardment, many of the bacteria would not survive in that electronic beam. So this is but on the other hand, the AFM is having disadvantage that the resolution of the AFM is much smaller compared to the transmission electron microscope. Transmission electron microscope is giving you the image with extremely high resolution and precise size. The size of the which you get from the atomic force microscope, it is not the precise one. It is the average or the approximate size. Because but with the transmission electron microscope, it is the precise size which you get, because the electron just penetrate in each and every part in the transmission electron microscope. While here you are using the distance. But again, advantage of the atomic force microscope is that you can generate 3D structure. While in the transmission electron or the scanning electron microscope, that is not the case. Here, the 3D is much more clean, clear, and this is just something one should know that what is that one. There are actually three imaging mode. One is called contact mode. In the contact mode, the sample and the tip, they directly become in contact. And this is normally, in many cases, we do not recommend, but in the material in certain material like polymers are very small nanoparticles which are very much fixed to the surface, you can use it because the resolution of the image in the contact mode is much better than the non-contact mode. The non-contact mode is mainly used for the biological samples, where when you are analyzing the biological sample, so you want that their native conformation remain intact. So you use the non-contact mode because it would not touch the sample. It would just establish a certain distance where it can deflect and generate image. Another in between of the non-contact and the contact is the tapping mode, where this just gently tap the surface. So here, then the resolution become better. So the third one is the most widely used one, the tapping mode. That is the mostly 90% of the AFM images are recorded through tapping mode. And the reason is that here you can generate a better quality image, and at the same time you also do not disturb the morphology and the structures of the image. So these are the three modes. In the in the contact mode, what happened that this cantilever, this is a flexible cantilever. This is just moving here, and when the laser is bombarded here, so you see that when it is coming down, up, down, this is the surface at the atomic level. The deflection in this light is different at different position, and that just create images. This is actually piezo-crystal, that what I mentioned earlier, that these are the material which can expand and contract in the presence of voltage gradient. And because in that case, this is important for the creation of the images. And the probes, the cantilever, we already discussed it. And these are actually, you know that every cantilever is having a spring constant or force constant. So you should know that what is the spring constant of your cantilever, because that is what you will have to report in your thesis and your publication. So normally it range from 0, 1 to 20 nanometer. This information is important for the person who is reviewing your paper, that which kind of cantilever you have used in the imaging process, because if you have reported something very soft and the and it is a very hard cantilever, then the reviewer will immediately questions your results. So these information are important. The resonance frequency is there, like you know that these whenever you are tapping, so a resonance frequency, that what Sarah and Tasmina will tell you in the afternoon, that you will have to lock the resonance frequency of your cantilever at certain stage, and that is normally for the contact mode it is smaller, like it is from 1 to 20, but for the tapping mode from 100 to 400 kilohertz, you will have to just keep your resonance frequency at that range. So it depends upon also the cantilever. Each cantilever is having every resonance frequency. So what I normally use to urge initially Saira and Shuja, that you will have to just lock the frequency after each measurement. So whenever you just withdraw your cantilever from the sample, then before just engaging it to the surface, you just lock the specific frequency. The reason is, you know that when the cantilever is just coming to the surface, it can just something from the surface can attach to the cantilever. So once the something attached to the cantilever, the resonance frequency will change. And if you are not locking the new resonance frequency, then you will generate artifacts. But if you have locked, so then you have locked the resonance frequency of that sample with the by just keeping in view the natural frequency, resonance frequency of the tip. So this is important, that you just lock the resonance frequency after each time. Otherwise, if there is any kind of dirt or any impurity on your surface, or if you have a cough and you just coughed in front of the sample or the cantilever, something from your breathing will just attach to the cantilever, because we are talking here about pico-Newton forces interaction between the tip and the sample. So it's a very sensitive. So that is the reason that imaging or just working with the system need in-depth understanding. Then it would just give you the reproducible and the desirable results. And that resonance frequency change if there is any kind of dip. Normally, the radius of the tip, it range from 1 nanometer to 20 nanometer, and this depend. There are advantages and disadvantages of this tip thing. Advantage, if you are using more thinner tip, the advantage is that you will get image of very good resolution, even at the resolution which you can get with the scanning electron microscope or transmission electron microscope. So the thinner the cantilever, the better the resolution. But the problem is that the thinner cantilever break easily. It break very quickly. And another disadvantage is that when you are just aligning your laser on the surface of the tip, that alignment is also difficult on the thinner cantilever compared to a thick cantilever. So these are the one, but it depends that if what you are using. The thinner cantilever are more expensive. The thick cantilever are comparatively more cheaper. So that is what is important, that if you want to have a better, and normally the back side, like this is the upper side, but this is the cantilever. You see, so this is if this radius and this is normally prepared from silicon nitride. So if this is more thinner, you will get better resolution, but it can break easily, and that's the reason that initially we used a bit more thicker cantilever surface. Similarly, if you want to do research with the different kind of research, and you can generate thousands of very interesting research topics, you can just fabricate your tapes with certain material, and you can get information out of that. For example, uh, you can fabricate your if you just carry out gold coating of your cantilever, you can fabricate this with thiols and having OH group at the terminal. And whenever you are just bringing that tape to the surface, then there would be a hydrogen bonding between that one, and that would generate image. For example, if you want to just get in-depth understanding of the protein folding or the mitochondria or something like that, you can just derivize your tape and then bring it back to that surface. That would generate a wealth of information that would give you much more information about the inside, the structure of that material. So you can do a lot with that just by derivatizing your similarly antigen and antibody interaction. You can just you can analyze that interaction, and you can just tell that what is the magnitude of the forces which are there. That is, you can only do with the AFM. There is no other technique which can precisely tell you that the antigen and antibody interaction are having this piconewton or this magnitude of the forces. That is a very, again, very important information, especially for our biological process. So there is thousands of application of this. What one can do, you can just play around with the tip, and then you can generate a lot of information out of this. This is the beam deflection that what we discussed, that the laser are bombarded on the tip, and then it is reflected, and you will see that it's just going up to the photodiode detector. This is the contact mode, the static mode, which I mentioned that it is used, but for those samples which are tightly bound to the surface. But if your material are not tightly bound to the surface, so then do not use this one. Otherwise, you would not get the desired information. So here, this is in the contact mode, as you can see that when it's come to the surface, so at the different surface, the cantilever deflection is different, and this deflection is in turn, and you can see in the deflection of the laser light, because the laser light would also deflect in a different pattern here. That is one. This is what I discussed. The advantage is I just mentioned that atomic resolution is possible with the contact mode. That what I mentioned, that it will give you much better resolution. The scan speed is also high. Here you can just set high scan speed, but do not set a very high scan speed. Otherwise, you will continue contaminate your sample with a greater speed, and similarly, the greater the speed, the lower the resolution. If you want to get a better resolution image, so always keep the speed low. That would give you much better resolution. But if you want to finish your analysis in 2 minutes, everything, so that would just give you some blur images or not images with the good resolution. So I would recommend to keep the speed low so that you can get a better resolution of the image. Similarly, there are like many other disadvantages. Mm, this non-contact mode is better for those sample, like for example, if you are analyzing you deposited a protein molecule and you do not want to just disturb its quaternary structure or tertiary structure or enzymes or biological material or cells even. If you do not want to disturb it and you want images, the resolution would not be that great, but still they would give you a fair good resolution with the non-contact mode, and the sample would not be deformed and it would not be damaged. So this is the only what I mentioned, lower lateral resolution and so on. And here the scan speed you will have to keep it much slower. The reason is that now your tip is a bit far from the surface, so you will have to keep the scan speed a bit smaller in order to give enough time to your tip and sample interactions. So if you are giving enough time to the tip and sample interaction, then what would happen? That would just give you a better resolution. This is also important. Yeah, you see the like this is a kind of small surface at the atomic level, and now the tip that is moving here. This is a cantilever. When you bring cantilever, it's bend like this. So if it is coming here, it would just come, and here is a better water droplet. So it would not touch the water. It would just be coming here, going here, and then going up here and then coming down, and it would like generate such kind of curves, and that is what will be important. Tapping mode, we already discussed the tapping mode because I have just 20 minutes, so let me just skip that one. Uh, Application in the life sciences, there are a number of applications like actin filaments, proteins can be analyzed, erythrocytes, you can see these cells, bacteria, DNA, and material sciences and nanolithography. So this is a very important tool. Just as you can see the DNA protein complexes that you can just see with the help of this technique at the molecular level. Okay, one can also do, let me just tell you some of the work which we have done in the past. So just give you an example that what can be done. This is actually the application part of the AFM. So what can be done with the AFM? There are, as I mentioned, there are thousands of application of the AFMs which you can do. Okay, what we had a challenge in in the beginning, it was like 15 to 16-year-old work, but still it is relevant. In the beginning, we developed this molecule, and we wanted actually to our aim was that this was the X-ray images of the biphenyl ring. So what we realized at that moment that the biphenyl ring that is like they have a torsion angle, like they would not stay like this, they would stay like this. So can we use this properties to get ion channel, like to just have nanopores out of data? So this was actually the initial idea which we were interested in. So my student Kamarali was actually working on this. And then I asked him that if you just synthesize this kind of structure, so this would just be undergoing through a cylindrical assembly, and we will get some nanopores. That is, but how to analyze that it is giving you nanopore? That was. So this was actually the basic idea that if you just attach any kind of material like peptides or macrocycle to these carboxylic acid, which can assemble or which can have intermolecular interaction, that would just force assembly like this, and then we can put in guest molecule and so on. So this was the initial idea, and then we prepared something like this. We incorporate in there, and but how to analyze that it is forming four, because for that then we discuss with one of my friend in Switzerland, and he suggested that we should have a biphenyl, and we could prepare this such kind of biphenyl lipid molecule, which we can attach to the surface, and then a vesicle we can attach, and then on the vesicle we can just load our own molecule. So what we took, we prepared these lipids molecules. That can be prepared very easily. It's not difficult. So we prepared this lipids, and these lipids molecules, they are actually mimicking the natural lipids which are there in our lipid bilayer of the cells. So we, of the same size, we just try to prepare, and this was the technique, the synthesis process which we used, and then we used to just analyze whether they are forming the layers or not. So then what problems we encountered, that we will have to in order to solve problem in resolution and depth, because it was a research work, so we experienced several problems. So these are some of the problems which we identified, and then we overcome on these problems, and we were able to get the desired images. So we cantilever, you need to keep it under vacuum, and overnight we clean the cantilever. Liquid cells were sonicated, because we analyze all these images in the liquid. It was not in the air. It was important. Sonication in ethanol, range, X-ray, CD, and so on. So these are some of the basic ideas. We were believing that when we just put this molecule on the surface, it would undergo rearrangement, and it would adopt a structure like this. And that is how we can prove it. So then what we did, we set up the liquid cell, and we just we entered this molecule and on the gold surface, and then we started the analysis, and this was roughness, and we know that this is the height. So in the area where there were we put, so we assume that initially it was adopting something like that. So the height was 0.329 in the roughness. That was basically responsible. If the roughness is more, it means that there are more particles. And we put that in the cells, and after assembly steps, as you can see that this surface is a bit rough. There is a roughness here, here is roughness. But when we added this one after 60 minutes, as you can see that there are these, they are filled down by this DPTL molecule, and the sub were decreased, which shows that somehow from this surface it's going like this. With the atomic force microscopy, we were monitoring it, and then after 60 minutes, what we observed, that we observed this big particles. There was these particles, and the height of these particles are 0.548 nanometer, which was exactly matching to the height of our DPTL molecule, and that what we observed it. So it shows that it's like undergoing through this process. Initially it was this, and then this, and then with the passage of time, you see that with the passage of time, it was just rearranging itself, but still the height of was there, and the height was 3.5, 3.6, and this is what and now a bit more smoother surface were obtained. So, and this was the surface of this molecule. So as you can see that there is a lot of flexibility because in that case, this is important to just put your molecule which can undergo cylindrical assembly through hydrogen bonding. So you need a surface like this. So once prepared this, we carried out the experiment, but we were not able to get the desired result. Then we put the vesicle on this, like this surface we obtained, and then we carried out the vesicle fusion, and we analyzed the vesicle through atomic force microscopy. These are all vesicle, giant vesicles, small vesicles. And then the self-diffusion of the vesicle were also observed. As you can see that these are the vesicles, they are just collapsing. These are many vesicles. These you see that they are in the middle. These vesicles are hollow. This is exactly this kind of vesicles, very much matching to this. That what we observe, and then after obtaining the fusion, they are now fusing. Like you see that in the middle, these vesicles having some surface, but they are now starting fusion, means that they are getting such kind of a structure. We are reaching to such kind of, and then they are now getting more flatter surface. That is what is known about the vesicles. This is the flatter surface which we obtain, and this is a bit more flatter surface. This is more flatter surface after a time. And after having this surface, this is a more flatter surface. Now we have like structure of this. After obtaining this structure, then we incorporated this molecule, and you can see that now there are pores. So that is we just took this, and it shows that this is undergoing that cylindrical assembly to give us the pore. So that is what initially we were thinking, but it took us 6 years from us to get to these results, and this is what we did. And then you know that I have 10 minutes, so I will finish. You can also do bioassay with the atomic force macro. So I'll just show you an example of the antimicrobial activity with the help of atomic force microscope. So that is one can, in this case, what we did, we image E. coli and Strep aureus in the liquid. And then antimicrobial evaluation with the cepatriaxone antibiotic. That was initially we were doing that in the liquid. This was a bit old, but later on we also did this experiment in the air. Because with the liquid it was much difficult. So later on we also did it in the air. So the result which I'm showing here, this is not in the liquid, but it is in the air. So the antimicrobial evaluation of the cepatriaxone conjugated with the gold and silver nanoparticle, that what we did, comparison of cepatriaxone and cepatriaxone conjugate gold nanoparticles. So this is that what I mentioned earlier, that this is actually E. coli, sample from the E. coli, and as you can see that there is like some grooves in the middle, like this one. So these were actually the bacteria which were analyzed. This is actually the E. coli bacteria which we analyzed, and this is the Strep aureus, and you can see that this is a single S. aureus, and on the surface there are like particles and lines with a very extremely good resolution. You in the past you cannot image to see the bacteria with such a good resolution to see what is on the surface of the bacteria. So that is with this is the beauty of this system, that you can see that what even with the help of these molecule on the surface, you can also tell the origin of the bacteria. That what one of our research project which we were believing that with the help of the particles which are there in these surfaces that would just tell you about the origin of the bacteria, that from where this bacteria is originated, because the environment in the Karachi is different than what is there in the Punjab and the KP. So that would just tell you that the nature of the compound. If you just identify the signature compound on the surface of this bacteria, you can just tell the people that, okay, this bacteria is originated or coming from that particular area. So this is with such resolution. Then these are the control samples of the E. coli, and then then we just treated this with the this is treated with the cepatraxone in 1 milligram 4 hour, 1 milligram and 1 milligram for 8 hours, and so on. So this is 5 milligram cepatraxone. You see that when we increase the concentration and time, the bacteria are just disappearing. So in the initially we saw a very intact bacteria. Now the bacteria is fragmented. And then the E. coli, when we treated this with the cepatraxone coated gold nanoparticle after 1 hour, 1 microgram. Here now we reduce the amount of the material. In that case, it was milligram, and now we are talking about the microgram. So that shows that after some time, there's 5 micrograms, and now you can see 5 micrograms after 8 hours. It's all the bacteria are just disappear and fragmented. It shows that the antimicrobial properties of the molecule. And here is the cell wall nanoparticle, and so on. So with this, we have 5 minutes for questions and answer. If you have any kind of question, I will be happy to answer. देखो कंटिन्यूअर जो होता है उसकी लाइफ आप अनलिमिटेड टाइम के लिए भी यूज कर सकते हैं सेम कंटिन्यूअर, प्रोवाइडेड के उसके ऊपर कोई टर्ट नहीं लगी है या जो है वो जो है ब्रोकन नहीं है. अगर वो सही है तो यू कैन यूज इट एज मेनी टाइम्स एज यू वांट. हाँ ऐसा ही है. वो असल में फिर इलेक्ट्रॉनिक सिस्टम के साथ कनेक्टेड है, तो वो उसको जो है ट्रांसमिट करता है इमेजिंग. जी बेटा. जी जी बिल्कुल. ये असल में इसमें मैं कुछ रिजल्ट नहीं दिखाए, लेकिन मेरे दूसरे कुलीग डॉक्टर अयाज उनके साथ हमने इस तरह के वो किए है कि अब बायो फिल्म्स भी उसमें वो कर सकते हैं, लेकिन एक बड़ा यानी टीडियस वर्क है कि बायो फिल्म्स का कि उसको डिटेक्ट करना, लेकिन यस इट इज डूइंग. जी या वही तो आप गेन कर, स्ट्रक्चर तो चेंज नहीं करेगा, लेकिन इंफॉर्मेशन आपको मिल जाएगी क्योंकि वो टच नहीं हो रहा है, वो उनके साथ इंटरेक्शन कर रहे हैं. तो वो डिपेंड करता है कि आप क्या चाहते हैं उसे. तो मसलन लेट्स से एएफएम का अपना टेप है ना, तो उनके इतनी ज़्यादा अच्छी इंटरेक्शन नहीं है लेट्स से किसी सैंपल से. आप चाहते ये है कि नहीं ये बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छी, मेरा इंटरेस्ट इसमें है कि ये ज़्यादा अच्छी इंटरेक्शन हो, जितनी ज़्यादा फोर्सेस का इंटरेक्शन होगा इतनी रेजोल्यूशन हाई होगी. तो वो आपने उसको ड्राइटाइज किया तो उनके इंटरेक्शन बढ़ गए, तो वो आपके पास इनसाइड द रिजोल्यूशन अच्छी वो करेगा। तो डिपेंड करता है कि आप अचीव क्या करना चाहते हैं। जी बेटी। जी जी देख सकते हैं, बिल्कुल देख सकते हैं कि फिलर का इफेक्ट भी देख सकते हैं। प्लस ये है कि आप ये भी कर सकते हैं कि जो पॉलीमर्स आपने डिपॉजिट किया है आप उसको उठा के पील अप भी कर सकते हैं। यानी दैट इज मैंने चूंकि टाइम कम था तो फोर्स स्पेक्ट्रोस्कोपी मैंने इसमें फोर्स का स्पेक्ट्रोस्कोपी का एक बड़ा अच्छा वो है। उसमें ये है कि आप कोई भी मटेरियल सरफेस पे है आप टिप लेके आ जाए उसे आपने उठा लिया और ये बता दिया कि भाई लेट से जैसे सबसे अच्छा एग्जांपल प्रोटीन का है कि प्रोटीन के क्वाटरनरी स्ट्रक्चर है। अब कितनी फोर्सेजों ने क्वाटरनरी स्ट्रक्चर को इंटैक्ट किया है। तो आप एफएम के टिप लेके आ जाए, प्रोटीन के एक सिरे से पकड़ ले, उसको आप खींचते रहे तो हाइड्रोजन बॉन्डिंग क्लियर होती जाएगी, आपको पता चलता जाएगा कि कितने पिको न्यूटन फोर्सेस से ये है। और आप क्वाटरनरी से टर्शरी और फिर सेकेंडरी पे और ऐसे ओपन कर सकते हैं। तो दैट इज डूएबल। इसी तरह एंजाइम्स को भी कर सकते हैं, डीएनए को भी कर सकते हैं, दैट इज डूएबल।
जब हम सैंपल यूज करेंगे उस 20 लेवल की सिलेक्शन किस बेस पे होगी कि अगर हम ये सैंपल यूज करेंगे 20 लेवल यूज करेंगे या ये सैंपल होगा ये सिलेक्शन
हाँ ये जो सैंपल प्रॉपर्टीज पे होती है। नॉर्मली अगर आपके पास हार्ड सैंपल है, हार्ड सरफेस है, तो फिर आपने जो रोबस्ट कंट्रोलेवर यूज करना है ताकि अच्छी रेजोल्यूशन। अगर सॉफ्ट है तो फिर थिनर है तो फिर इनका अपना स्प्रिंग कांस्टेंट भी डिफरेंट। ठीक है मेरा टाइम ओवर हो गया। थैंक जी जी जी।
Struggling this morning to accommodate maximum number of students. Sir, please announce करते हैं कि हम जल्दी ही एक और AFM की वर्कशॉप करवाएंगे इन हाउस।
अच्छा हाँ बिल्कुल इंशाल्लाह इन हाउस स्टूडेंट के लिए बहुत जल्दी एक और टाइम को देखते हुए अवेलेबिलिटी को तो फिर एक और इंशाल्लाह करवाएंगे। बाकी ये है कि सायरा और तस्मीना जो है आज जो प्रैक्टिकल डिमॉन्स्ट्रेशन है, सैंपल प्रिपरेशन है एफएम के जितनी भी अच्छा इसमें अभी जो मैंने जो कुछ बताया ये सिर्फ 5 to 10% है जो हमारे पास अवेलेबल है। यानी 90% चीज़ें नहीं बताई क्योंकि वो टाइम कंस्ट्रेंट की वजह से। तो है बहुत कुछ है, मैग्नेटिज्म है, देखो हमारे मैग्नेटिज्म कर सकते हैं, इलेक्ट्रोड पोटेंशियल कर सकते हैं। हम ये बता सकते हैं कि जो सरफेस है एट द उसके इसमें कितना करंट पास हो सकता है। हम ये बता सकते हैं कि इसमें कंडक्टिंग है या नहीं है। इस तरीके से इसका एक और जो टेक्निक है एसटीएम है वो भी हमारे पास है, उसी उसमें है। उसमें स्कैनिंग टनलिंग माइक्रोस्कोपी है, वो भी वो है। तो अगले वर्कशॉप में अगर ये हम फिर एक सीरीज करेंगे एक में मुख्तलिफ टेक्निक इसमें वो कवरेज करते हैं। ओके थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for such a detailed lecture about the basics of atomic force microscope. Our next speaker is Dr. Maqsood Ahmed Chotani. Dr. Chotani is an associate professor and principal investigator at Molecular Signaling Laboratory at the Dr. Panjwani Center for Molecular Medicine and Drug Research, International Center for Chemical and Biological Sciences, University of Karachi. His primary research interests are focused on cell signaling, including understanding the role of small GTPase, RAP1A in cellular function, particularly in cellular response to environmental stress. Today, he will be discussing about the imaging approaches available at iccbs with some examples of his work. The title of his title is Microscopy Imaging for Biological Research at the iccbs. So please welcome Professor Chotani.
So thank you very much, Dr. Sambar, and Assalamu alaikum everyone, or good afternoon, good morning, almost good afternoon ho gaya. I hope everyone is awake and enjoying the exciting lecture that Dr. Raza gave. There's so many possibilities and a lot of things he didn't talk about. My perspective that I'll talk to you today about is from a cell biologist approach. What we do at ICCBS and the facilities, imaging facilities available to us for our work at ICCBS. So at the end, basically, you will get a chance to compare the advantages and disadvantages of AFM and the unique feature of AFM that Dr. Raza described, and the applications that are very exclusive to AFM compared to the other conventional approaches that I'll be talking about. So to begin with, I think this is. To begin with, let me ask you a basic question, because you're sitting in a workshop that is atomic force microscopy. In your mind, because you're coming from a different background, what is the definition of microscopy? Anyone, can you just give a very simple definition of microscopy? Micro level, right? So basically, you have an image that you want to enhance, you want to enlarge, basically, is what they think. So now with the definition of atomic force microscopy and the applications, the definition of microscopy has now expanded to include the use of optical or mechanical instrument, because a cantilever is a mechanical way to capture images, to produce or convert a magnified images of small samples. So this is the way I describe it, because this key application काफी बड़ी गई है. Or microscopy actually played a very important role because it led to the cell doctrine, or long time ago, cell concept highly basically, the cell is the basic unit of life. It also led to the discovery of the world of microorganisms, because ये नजर ही नहीं आते थे लोगों को, infections अगर हो रहे, they can't see it because they had no concept that there are microorganisms present. In fact, also in our skin, in our body, in our gut, basically. That is, in fact, a new area of research, the gut microbiome research. So I'm sure can think of an example. आपने microscope use करा होगा बचपन में. क्या था वो? Exactly. तो ये आपने magnifying glass करा था. मैंने भी बहुत use करा था and enjoyed seeing small insects basically, or leaf को आप burn कर सकते हैं sun के साथ. You can play with it basically. But all of us have used a microscope and are pretty much familiar that you can magnify images that are very small for your eye to actually distinguish. And nowadays in the lab, अगर आप GPL में जाएंगे तो the compound microscope in the GPL at ICCBS का जो है basically इसका includes a light source, a condenser that will actually focus the light to the specimen on the stage, and an objective which will collect the light or actually transmit to the eyepiece, or फिर आपके retina में इसका image बनेगा, या you can use a camera to capture the image. So this is basically now the format basically used in a simple compound microscope जो आपने probably आपने college में use करा होगा उसका applications. Now I tried to trace back the history of microscopy, and this actually spans 1,000 years. And I was able to trace back to a Persian mathematician, Ibn Sahal, actually, who lived at the time which was known as the golden time of Islam, between 940 and 1000 AD. And his work is actually documented on burning mirrors and lenses. Basically, he outlined the basic principles of refraction and the use of lenses basically to manipulate light. He was followed by a very well-known scientist, Ibn al-Haytham, who lived between 965 and 1040. He was the father of modern optics, and his work is also documented in Kitab al-Manazir. And his actually ideas led to the development of the microscope later on. So the one point just to keep in mind, because all of us are trying to publish, what is the reason for publication? Because if I never came across the publications of these individuals or documentation of the work they did, no one would know what they did, actually. So same thing applies to us. It's a legacy. You publish because the current and the future generation can actually read the work. At this time, it may not be significant, possibly, but maybe later on, 5 years or 10 years later on, it might be the most significant work that you have actually done. So documenting your work, your scientific publications, through scientific publications is absolutely vital. Then we come across a person from England, Robert Hooke, who lived between 1635 and 1703. And again, his work is also documented in Micrographia. And he devised a microscope using lenses. A replica of this microscope is so shown in this figure. And he was able to see very small insects, fleas, and more and the cork tissue. Basically, when he saw cork tissue, he saw these empty chambers in the cork tissue that reminded him of monks meditating in a monastery. So the word cell was coined during his time when he saw this structure. Then we have another important individual, Antony van Leeuwenhoek, who was a Dutch lens crafter. Basically, his skills were specifically in crafting high magnification lens. Especially, he designed a 200x magnification lens that allowed him to devise this gadget, actually. The tip of the gadget included the lens, and then he was able to place on the tip of this lens the samples that he wanted to actually observe. So he could take some tissue from his mouth, saliva, or anything that he could thought was microscopic, basically. And he made his observations again in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. But this work actually opened a whole new avenue of research for microorganisms, or what he called animalcules. He didn't know what to call them, basically, but this was the beginning of basically the study of microorganisms and the appreciation of the presence of bacteria, for example, that could lead to other infections, for example, in humans. And again, following his findings and Robert Hooke's findings, actually, there are also documentations in the journal Lancet has very well documented the application of microscopy in diagnosing and observing patients in the clinic a very long time ago also. And then over a span of 300 years, rapid developments took place. Then we have the development of microscopes that are now conventionally used in our research. That includes the bright field microscope, phase contrast microscope, differential interference contrast microscope, fluorescence microscope, X-ray crystallography, nuclear magnetic resonance, electron microscopy, and the scanning tunnel microscope that Dr. Raza alluded to was actually discovered in the 1980s, and the Nobel Prize was awarded for the discovery in 1986 for this STM. And this was a precursor to the atomic force microscope. So all these discoveries are lining up, basically, but it takes a long time for other people to catch up and appreciate the findings. So to build on these discoveries, and in the past decade, we have, for example, in 2014, we have the development of a super resolution microscopy, which actually gives you even more higher resolution compared to these traditional approaches. And this was awarded a Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2014. So it didn't end there. And then we have a 2017, a Nobel Prize awarded in chemistry for cryo-electron microscopy. And this actually allowed molecules to be observed at the atomic level. So this is, again, another fascinating field that is more recent. And I'm sure as in our lifetime, in the near future also, we'll be seeing remarkable breakthroughs, some of which Dr. Raza mentioned, which is the application of nanotechnology. So some of the applications that you may have seen, but we don't think about this every day. This is used in the hospitals almost routinely for karyotype analysis. And you basically to look for any chromosomal abnormalities in individuals who are actually planning a family, and can be used for genetic counseling. The fluorescent in situ hybridization is a very powerful approach that is also used in the clinic for diagnostic purposes, and particularly in cancer patients such as the leukemia that involves the translocation of chromosome parts, such as the Philadelphia chromosome, which is a translocation of chromosome 9 and 22, and can be diagnosed using fluorescent in situ hybridization, which labels the genomic sequence of interest. For example, sequence for chromosome 9, chromosome 22. However, if they are very close to each other, it is suggesting that they may have translocated, and that could be the basis of diagnosis of leukemia in patients. And so, of course, the diagnosis is very critical depending on the condition of the patient, because the treatment the doctor will prescribe to you is based on this diagnosis. If they are unable to do a correct diagnosis, the treatment most likely won't work. And then, of course, you've heard about the human immunodeficiency virus in the 70s and 80s. This was an enigma, the cause of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome known as AIDS was identified using microscopy. The Ebola virus, which causes a hemorrhagic fever, was also identified using electron microscopy. And these are very important images because they speak a lot about the source of the disease. Because if you don't see the actual reason why the person is sick, I mean the physicians are unable to actually diagnose or prescribe any medication. And similarly, we have the coronavirus, the SARS in 2003, MERS in 2012, and more recently, we have the coronavirus 2019, which is a COVID-19, which was actually diagnosed again by a patient from his lung samples and was reported actually through a publication in China. If you get a chance to read that, it was a very rapid publication, how they diagnosed the patient, and they came up with imaging of this virus that they identified as a new type of virus, which was classified as COVID-19. So up to our most recent history basically is we are seeing the applications of microscopy. That is all in everyday examples basically you can see in the news. For our research purposes, this has been used extensively to study developmental organisms such as the fruit fly, worm, zebrafish, mouse. And the fly embryo is a classic example that has been used for studying the different stages of the fruit fly during development, and particularly developmentally regulated genes that are important for fly segmentation. And different stages can be looked at from stages 5 up to stage 14, and the expression of these genes can be also observed using high resolution microscopy. Mouse embryos can now be looked at the embryonic stage 0.5 and going all the way up to embryonic day 13.5. And this is critical because these model systems are actually used to knock out genes. So genetically manipulating these organisms can actually lead to new information about the function of these genes in these organisms, and especially the potential role in disease. So these are associated with actually human conditions that associate the gene actually with the human disease. So some of the imaging modalities that are available at iccbs, some of the imaging modalities that I've used for our research, I'd like to review that for you. Some of the facilities were, in fact, unknown to me also, and actually as I gathered more information. So ICCB has a great resource for trainees, MPhil, and PhDs and collaborative research, which can use these imaging modalities to conduct your work. So beginning with the HEJ Research Institute, they have the nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR facility, the X-ray crystallography, and basically you can elucidate the structure of the biological molecules using these approaches. And then the Dr. Panjwani Center, you have cell biology facilities for your studies that are related to cell biology, which is more relevant to my domain. The cell culture facility has microscopes that allow imaging for bright field, phase contrast, and fluorescence microscopy, and different objectives at 10x up to 100x. You can do your imaging using these tools available at PCMD. They also have a cell biology lab and also the general practical lab, and that has a tissue embedding machine, microtome, cryomicrotome, fumer, and the processing samples for immunohistochemistry and immunocytochemistry, which is actually, you can't see that at the bottom. So all these tools are necessary if you want to process these samples and then move forward with your imaging for these samples. The National Imaging Facility at the Virology building has different types of microscopes. More recent addition was a Nikon TI2 Eclipse microscope, which has a very good and more advanced features for imaging, bright field, DIC, phase contrast, and also fluorescence imaging. And there are some other older microscopes that are available for use also. There's also a stereo microscope available at SMZ 800 that you can use for dissection purposes, for example, for small animal studies. And these are the applications, as I just mentioned, using these microscopes. The LEJ Nanotechnology Center has the atomic force microscope, and I believe the workshop will be at the LEJ conducted. I think that's where all of you will be going for this workshop. And they also have the scanning electron microscope, and hopefully in the near future, there'll be a workshop also on this instrument where you'll have hands-on experience on using these machines basically for your research applications. The animal facility also has imaging tools available, a fluoroscopic imaging microscope or lab scope available, which allows real-time X-ray imaging and also in vivo imaging of small animals. You can use it in combination with fluorophores or contrast dyes actually to do your studies. So a lot of things are available. You can have access to here at this institute. So what are the applications of the microscopes available at iccbs? Some of the applications I'll go through for your information, and so you'll get a better idea of what these instruments are and what the advantages of using these instruments are compared to the atomic force microscope. So for example, our cell culture studies, you can do in vitro studies using phase contrast and differential interference contrast microscopy. And basically these approaches, the phase contrast and the DIC, exploit the light properties to enhance the contrast for your imaging. And the goal is to make unstained objects visible and we assess the live cell health and growth for your cultured cells. Basically, we have used bright field microscopy for fixed tissue imaging, where the tissue is stained with hematoxylin and eosin, which is a histological stain. And we can actually now image tissue sections, for example, such as this section of the mouse liver that we were able to stain with H&E. And you can see the pink cytoplasmic stain and the dark blue stain for the nuclei shown at a 400 magnification. Live cell imaging can also be done using phase, using DIC or the phase contrast approaches. It essentially uses the wave feature of the light and the change in phase of the light as it crosses the cell, depending on the region of the cell, for example, the cytoplasm, the nucleus, or the mitochondria, or endoplasmic reticulum, or the Golgi apparatus. So there'll be a phase shift in the light, and this is actually now captured as a contrast in the cell. So the phase of the light is altered by the passage through the different parts of the cell and shows you the image. Some of the examples I can give you are for bright field microscopy are for fixed cells, or you can use it also for live cells. But essentially, it just gives a contrast on the light absorption of the cell and can be used in conjunction with histological stains, as I've just shown you. And if you use bright field microscopy to see a fibroblast, this is what it's going to look like. And you can see the outline of the fibroblast, but you can actually enhance the contrast using phase contrast imaging, which uses an annular ring and a phase plate. And essentially, it converts the optical part differences to intensify the differences And you see the variations in the phase, which is just coming through the different regions of the cell, depending on the cytoplasm or the different structures, as I mentioned. So you get a much better contrast, and this is what you see with the phase contrast imaging. You can compare the two, basically. However, my favorite is differential interference contrast microscopy, known as an Microscopy microscopy, which converts the rate of change of optical path across the specimen. Essentially, the phase shift and the amplitude shift will give you the image basically as a light or dark structures of the cell. And you can see the organelles much better and gives a much better like a 3D outline. Basically, it uses polarizing filters and prisms to actually give you these images, which is basically manipulation of the light. So an example from our studies includes the studies on a genetically modified mouse, which is a RAP1 GTPase knockout mouse. It's a C57 Black 6 strain mouse that we are doing our studies on. We are looking at different aspects of the GTPase in different tissues. That includes the heart, the pancreas, and even the microcirculation, including the tail artery of these mice. So we can actually dissect or microdissect the tail artery of these mice. And this is a cross-section stained with hematoxylin and eosin. And we can actually cut the tail into small pieces, explant these tissues in culture, expand these cells in culture, and actually use them for our studies. And just to give you an example, this is what it looks like. We have these are tissue explants from the blood vessel, and we can now track the growth of these cells coming from these explants using phase contrast microscopy. These cells will eventually take over the 612 plate. We can expand to a T25 or T75 flask, and then eventually make stocks, which we store at the liquid nitrogen for future use. And so we don't have to do this over and over again. Basically, we can actually preserve the stocks for our research. And we can now also use fluorescence microscopy, utilizing antibody against the protein of interest, and visualize using different fluorophores or by using different biochemical approaches for detection. So for example, if you use a primary antibody against the antigen of your protein of your interest, it will actually bind to the antigen. And then you can detect it by using a secondary antibody, which is labeled, fluorescently labeled, or it's got a color reaction, which has got an enzyme that actually reacts with the substrate and actually gives you a brown color at the site of localization of your target protein. You can also tag it with gold nanoparticles and use it for electron microscopy imaging. The color reaction, in fact, uses a chemical called 3,3'-diaminobenzidine or DAB reagent. This is a peroxidase substrate, and then it reacts with the when it's combined with the secondary antibody enzyme peroxidase, it actually gives a brown pigment, which actually localizes your target of the protein of interest in the specimen. And as I mentioned, you can use the gold nanoparticles for use in electron microscopy as well. For cultured cells, we can do expand the mouse cells that I talked about. These are the microvascular smooth muscle cells. We can grow them in culture, do different experimental conditions, treated conditions, and also compare with the knockout RAP1A GTPase micro VSMs. And then we can fix these cells in paraformaldehyde and process them for staining using either permeabilized cells or non-permeabilized cells, which allows the antibody access or allows the antibody to detect only the cell surface proteins present on the cell surface. Then we can take it to the fluorescence microscope to detect, for example, in this channel, this is the blue channel. This will excite the fluorophore to an excited state, and when it actually drops to the ground state, actually does an emission, which is a characteristic emission for this particular wavelength of light for the fluorophore. And in using the fluorescence microscope, which uses filters and mirrors, basically, it can filter the light of your selected choice, basically, and you can excite the sample with the fluorophore, and it will emit the light of which is for the fluorophore, which you can detect using the eyepiece or a camera. So these are some applications of the fluorescence microscopes from from our lab that we were looking at these cultured murine microvascular smooth muscle cells, where we actually use the conditions of serum starvation to look at a receptor that we are very interested in the microcirculation. And under quiescent conditions, we can see that the receptor is present inside the cell. It's perinuclear in red color. And then where you can also look at the F actin, which is actually really not present in these quiescent conditions. And we can do the overlay, which is the green, and the red, which is merged. Now we can treat these cells with a activating agent, forskolin in this case, which will increase the intracellular cyclic AMP levels. And we see a dramatic change or shift in the receptor localization. It actually is now present on F actin filaments. It's on the cell surface, shown by these arrows. And when we can co-localize with F actin, we can see the co-localization with shown as a yellow color, basically, which is the receptor now is trafficking on the F actin. So these are very simple fluorescence microscopy approaches that we can also use to quantify the fluorescence intensity on the cell surface, which was really gives you more power actually to assess the role of compounds. Actually, you can screen compounds using in silico approaches and also experimental approaches to see if these compounds will actually inhibit the translocation of this receptor to the cell surface, which actually has clinical relevance for this particular receptor that we are studying. So for tissue imaging, we can also do bright field and fluorescence. And again, so you can use antibodies of interest and also use the color reaction or biochemical detection. This is an example of the mouse tail artery that I've shown you before. This is a cross-section of the tail artery, and this is stained by hematoxin and eosin. We can also visualize these the section using the DAP color reaction that I talked about, but for this we use specifically a smooth muscle alpha-actin antibody, which is selected for the vascular smooth muscle cells, which actually make up the blood vessel and responsible for the constriction and dilation of the blood vessel. So this is a DAB reaction, a color reaction. You can also do fluorescence imaging. You can pretty much get the more specific results for the vascular smooth muscle positive cells that we actually isolated and then propagated in culture. For our heart project, we have used trichome staining, which actually allows staining of the extracellular matrix, more specifically the collagen fibers. And we can do experiments in the heart, basically using ischemia, reperfusion injury, or myocardial infarctions to see the changes in the collagen or the matrix in the wild type mice as well as the gene knockout mice. And we have seen really exciting and more interesting results more recently using these approaches. In the pancreas, basically, you can see the islets, which are cells that express insulin in the pancreas. And we can stain these very specifically with the insulin antibody, which is giving you the red stain. So again, using the wild type mice and knockout mice and then experimental approaches, we were able to show that actually the gene knockout or the RAF1A affects the insulin secretion actually in the knockout mice. So it's playing a very important role. And we combine these studies with proteomic studies actually to identify some of the key players that are involved in insulin secretion, insulin processing, or the pre-insulin levels that potentially that are involved in the regulation of insulin that we are pursuing actually now. So for high resolution imaging, some of the instruments I've mentioned. One instrument that is present along with the AFM is the scanning electron microscope in the LEJ nano building. But this will actually give you images of the cell surface features. And the depth of focus and resolution, as Dr. Raza mentioned, actually is pretty good, actually, between 3 nanometers and 20 nanometers. But this uses an electron gun to generate electron beam, which you can focus using the condenser and the beam deflector, and you can actually expose your specimen using this approach, and then capture the images using the video imaging approaches. And these are some images that you can actually capture using the scanning electron microscope. For example, this is a wheat flour pollen grain, bacteria. Again, you can see the depth of field and the 3D image that actually is generated using the scanning electron microscope. So far I've described to you the use of conventional instruments that use different sources of light basically for detection. So for example, the bright field microscopy that I've talked about, it uses a halogen lamp or the LED lamp. The fluorescence microscope uses a mercury lamp, and you can get many wavelengths. You can use filters and mirrors actually to select the wavelength of your choice and do the citation and emission studies using fluorescence. We can also combine this and make it even stronger using a laser, which gives you one wavelength and will allow you to enhance the capacity of our microscopes to a confocal microscope, in which you can slice your actually sample using the laser, and actually gives a much higher resolution image compared to the ones that I've actually shown you earlier. Then you have the electron beam, the tungsten filament actually that is used in the electron microscope. So compared to all these approaches, then we have the atomic force microscope, which uses a cantilever, and essentially the deflection and the mechanical property of this machine was described by Dr. Raza in great detail. So now you have a comparison of the conventional or the traditional approaches compared to the AFM, and the unique feature of the AFM, because it doesn't use lenses, doesn't use light. The light used is a laser, but you have to use the laser to detect the cantilever movement, basically. But you don't need it for actually the sample itself. So this is something that has already been reviewed by Dr. Raza. The atomic force microscope will produce topographic images by scanning a sample with a nanometer scale probe, which is the cantilever, which is like a spring, and is used to visualize single biomolecules. And you can also use it for live or fixed cells or tissues, as Dr. Raza mentioned, at the nanoscale resolution without drying or coating. Some of the images that Dr. Raza shared were really striking, especially the bacteria images, and were really striking in the presence or the absence of the compound that they were looking at. This is also used in mechanobiology. And at the end, Dr. Raza mentioned stretching a molecule, a chemical molecule. So you could use it for biological applications as well, which I'll show you in the next slide. But it can measure force from 10 piconewtons to micronewtons, and is now coupled with fluorescence microscopy, where you can monitor intercellular dynamics for mechanotransduction studies. So you can actually couple it to other technologies to enhance the information that you extract from your samples. This figure is basically a summary of what you've already seen in the first half, which includes the cantilever for the atomic force microscope, and the laser is actually focused on the cantilever, and actually the deflection of the cantilever allows the image capture, basically. And the X, Y, Z axes that the images are captured in. Again, this is already discussed with Dr. Raza. The van der Waals forces are involved with the tip and the sample. And this produces attractive or repulsive forces that moves the probe up and down. And then the spring constant of the cantilever is known, as he mentioned. There's different values, and you can select the one that you want to use for your particular sample. And the distance between the probe and the sample surface, basically, you can also use that to calculate the force using Hooke's law based on this information. So why is it useful? Because you can determine the force actually required. For example, in the the mechanical studies that are, I'll show you that in the next slide. So the motion is detected by a laser beam, as I mentioned. The probe scans a sample in the X, Y, or Z direction, and you get a 3D nanoscale image. Some of the images which you saw in Dr. Raza's presentation. So here's a mechanobiology application. As the tip can actually bind to the molecule, and as you lift the tip up, it will actually stretch the molecule. Depending on the molecule that you're looking at, it could be a chemical that you have synthesized. For example, you want to look at the strength of the molecule. But in this very specific example is of a molecule that is present in striated muscle. And the muscle includes a contraction unit known as the sarcomere. and includes a lot of proteins that are involved in the contraction and relaxation of the muscle, and especially the protein called titin is the largest protein present in our body. Its size is about 4.2 megadaltons, and includes multiple repeats of immunoglobulin and fibronectin. And basically, the study actually focused on how much force is required to open up these repeats. Why is that important? Because you can actually now assess the force required or force involved in the muscle contraction and relaxation, because this protein gives the muscle and the elastic features basically, and the ability to contract and relax basically. So the researchers, obviously it's a large protein, they can't use the entire protein. What they did was they used the 8 repeats of this protein to study the effect of the force necessary actually to open these 8 repeats using the atomic force microscopy approach. So for what they uncovered was that if you use this approach to unfold these repeats to a completely fully stretched molecule, you will need 200 piconewtons of force per unit to open 1 repeat, basically. And then you can imagine now this is a large molecule, and how much force is now, you can imagine, is now required for the muscle actually for it to work. You can extrapolate this to conditions such as human conditions that have mutations or alterations in the protein function that affect the actual muscle function. And you can compare the defect actually due to the mutation in the force generation or force required for actually opening these repeats. So this is one very specific example in mechanobiology for AFM. This is another example of AFM using chondrocytes. These are cultured on a stretchable substrate. Basically, chondrocytes are specialized cells of the cartilage. They are part of the extracellular matrix, and they play a very important role in recovery of the cartilage during injury or damage. So this experiment was looking at the different conditions in culture using atomic force microscopy. They looked at the baseline condition. These cells are cultured in the baseline conditions. The atomic force microscopy showed a very smooth surface of these cells. They treated the cells with IL-1 beta, which basically will activate the gene expression in these cells. And they made observations on the topography or the cell surface of the receptors. And they also stretched the cells for 24 hours on this rubber substrate. And then after 24 hours, they saw a significant reorganization of the actin cytoskeleton. The surface was more granular compared to the control cells, and the shape of the cell changed. And you can see very closely also that there are these vesicles translocation to the cell surface. There are filaments present inside the cell that could very nicely be detected using the atomic force microscope. When they combine this with IL-1 beta, then they saw a different profile. But the point is that you can use these conditions to test the role of different molecules that are involved in tissue recovery. For example, the cartilage recovery, or the combination of molecules, for example, in combination with IL-1 beta or some other molecule that might be beneficial actually that allows the cell to recover faster. And of course, this all has translational applications for patients. So in summary, compared with the conventional microscopy, the atomic force microscope is a unique and powerful instrument that produces topographic images by scanning the sample surface with a nanoscale cantilever compared to the approaches that I discussed. It is used to visualize single molecules, biomolecules, live or fixed cells or tissues to generate a 3D nanoscale image. And it has applications spanning various fields, a lot of fields that Dr. Raza also discussed with you, and that include the bioengineering, material sciences, nanotechnology, mineralogy, biology, and medicine. So with this, I'll just end my part of the talk, and thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, then I'll be happy to address them. Thank you very much.
with this, we have the first theoretical part of the workshop, and we will continue the second part, that is both full hands-on training in our Nanotechnology Center and right after lunch. Let's get back to it.